We know with the cost of homes, it's been decades since the federal government's really taken an active role in building homes. And we know that with 8 years of Liberals, the costs have only gone up. The cost of mortgages, the cost of homes, the cost of rent have all gone up. They've not taken this matter seriously. On top of that, the cost of groceries. It's something that really is hurting families. I remember a family I spoke to in the summer, and they've both got good jobs. They've got a young daughter, and they worry that they're not able to make the best choices when it comes to their nutrition because it's so costly to buy healthy food. And they both have good jobs, and they're wondering, how do people make it when they don't have good jobs? The reality is that Canadians across the country are struggling with the cost of groceries. And it's been 20 months since food inflation has outpaced general inflation. That's almost 2 years. And what has this Liberal government done? Nothing but delay and disappoint. They've not taken on the major driver of the cost of groceries going up, which is corporate greed. Greedy CEOs who have used inflation as cover to drive up the cost of groceries. And we know that the Conservatives aren't going to take on corporate greed. They work for the super rich. They work for these wealthy CEOs and executives and the lobbyists. They're not going to take on the corporate greed that's driving up your costs, but we are. That's why we're proposing a law that will strengthen competition in Canada, which will put an end to price gouging, price fixing, and to mergers, which continue to allow for monopolies when it comes to our groceries, but other services as well. When we call the CEOs, the largest corporate grocery stores to Parliament, I was the only leader that showed up to ask them questions. Neither Pierre Poilievre or Justin Trudeau was there. It's not surprising that they're not there. Both of these parties have supported these wealthy corporations. They get donations from these wealthy CEOs. They're not willing to stand up to them, but New Democrats are. That's why we challenge them and ask them, how dare you continue to make record profits when Canadians can't even afford their groceries? And that's why we're putting forward a concrete law which will strengthen the ability of the Competition Bureau to take on the corporate greed of these corporations, to challenge the price gouging and price fixing which goes on. And just to remind Canadians, it wasn't that long ago, 2018, the large corporate grocery stores and large bread producers were found to have colluded to drive up the price of bread. That happened in Canada. And the Competition Bureau doesn't have enough power and the tools necessary to stop this and to investigate this early enough to catch it before it starts harming people. That's what we're going to change. We're going to change the laws to make it easier for the Competition Bureau to take on this price gouging and other types of behavior which hurts Canadians and drives up the cost of food. Donc, depuis le début de cet été, j'ai eu la chance de parler avec les Canadiens. Et ils ont partagé deux grandes inquiétudes. Le fait que le coût du logement augmente et le fait que le coût d'épicerie augmente. Et que les gens ont beaucoup de misère de rejoindre les deux bouts à cause du coût d'inflation, particulièrement le coût du logement et l'épicerie. Et malgré le fait qu'on ait ce grand défi, après 8 ans de gouvernement libéral, les choses s'empirent. C'est plus cher pour payer les loyers, d'acheter des maisons. Et ça fait 20 mois, presque 2 ans, que le taux d'inflation pour les épiceries était plus haut que le taux d'inflation en général. C'est presque 2 ans. Et c'était quoi la réaction du gouvernement libéral? Des délais et de la déception. Et ils n'ont pas réglé ce problème. Et ils n'ont pas agi. Et les conservateurs, ils ne sont pas qui ils prétendent être. Quand ils étaient au pouvoir, ils ont donné des grands cadeaux aux riches entreprises d'épicerie au lieu de les forcer de payer ce qu'ils doivent. Donc, c'est nous les démocrates qui ont des solutions. On va proposer une loi aujourd'hui qui va renforcer les protections pour les consommateurs, qui va mettre fin aux pratiques qui augmentent les coûts d'épicerie et qui va défendre les consommateurs, qui va défendre les Canadiens. Quand on a demandé les grands PDG, des PDG des grandes entreprises d'épicerie d'être ici au Parlement, j'étais le seul chef du parti qui ait posé des questions directement au CPDG. parce que les autres partis n'ont pas le courage de faire face à l'avarice des grandes entreprises, ce qui fait en sorte que l'avarice de ces entreprises contribue à l'inflation des épiceries. On est là pour vous. On va continuer de se battre pour vous. Thanks, merci. With that, I'm ready for any questions you might have.
The Competition Bureau recently made recommendations to the government to modernize competition laws. Minister Gould today said that the Liberal government is going to do that. So how is what you're proposing any different?
The difference is this Liberal government has known for 20 months, for almost 2 years, that the rate of inflation for food, for groceries, has outpaced general inflation. What that means for families, that's 20 months where families have been paying thousands of dollars more because this government has refused to act. What we're proposing is not further delays, but a concrete law right now. It's going to be presented in the House today. That is a law that could be passed before families are buying groceries for Christmas dinner. This could be passed and protect Canadians from mergers that continue to increase the price of goods and services, protect Canadians from price gouging and price fixing. This is a concrete law. In the face of 20 months of delay of the Liberals and further disappointment, this is concrete action we're taking today, now.
And then you obviously have a deal with the Liberals. They said they're going to introduce their own bill to address competition laws. Is your expectation that they support your law, or is their law going to be any different than what you're proposing here?
We just want to get this done. The reality is that 20 months of delay is not giving us much confidence that the Liberals will actually move forward on this. If they were serious about it, if they saw what we saw, why didn't they take action 20 months ago? We demanded that the big CEOs of these large corporate grocers come to Parliament. Neither Justin Trudeau or Pierre Poilievre had the courage to ask them questions. I did. I demanded directly, justify these high prices and your record profits. They couldn't. So we've been doing the work. I don't believe or have confidence that the Liberals will do it. That's why we propose our own law. But ultimately, we want to see this law passed. We want to see Canadians protected, and we want to see the price of food come down.
Vous n'avez pas eu l'engagement de la leader du gouvernement. Vous n'avez pas eu l'engagement de Karina Gould en disant on va appuyer cette loi, les libéraux.
Non, on n'a pas reçu un engagement du Parti libéral ou du House Leader qu'ils vont appuyer notre projet de loi. Et je ne suis pas surpris parce qu'ils ont pris plus de 20 mois et ils n'ont pas agi malgré le fait que l'inflation d'épicerie était plus haut que l'inflation générale. C'était presque 2 ans et ils n'ont pas agi. Le délai, ça coûte cher.
Est-il exact que vous allez rencontrer M. Trudeau aujourd'hui, ou est-ce que vous allez le rencontrer, vous l'avez rencontré? Qui a demandé cette rencontre et qu'est-ce que vous allez discuter? C'est quoi l'objectif?
Donc, on va rencontrer le Premier ministre plus tard aujourd'hui. C'est un élément de le fait qu'on a un pouvoir dans ce gouvernement minoritaire et on demande des rencontres régulièrement pour forcer le gouvernement d'agir. Donc, on va soulever 3 choses, le coût du logement, le coût des épiceries et puis l'assurance médicaments et le fait qu'on a besoin d'un projet de loi. Et à ce moment, le gouvernement libéral n'est pas clair et n'ont pas accepté les recommandations de leur propre comité qui a exigé qu'on a besoin d'une assurance médicaments universelle, entièrement universelle, publique, qui va couvrir tout le monde, et un programme qui va aider les gens au lieu d'enrichir les grandes entreprises d'assurance et de pharmaceutiques.
The says that the auto companies and the union are still far apart. What are you hoping to see happen today before contracts expire at midnight tonight?
I want to see fairness for workers. We've seen for the past period of time, workers have really stood up and said, with the cost of inflation going up, with companies making huge profits, we deserve our fair share, and they absolutely do. Let us be very clear. New Democrats will always stand on the side of workers. You're not going to see Justin Trudeau or Pierre Poilievre show up on strike actions where workers are demanding fairness for wages or for work conditions, but New Democrats have shown up. I will and have continued to show up for workers in that meaningful way. We believe workers deserve fair salaries that keep up with inflation. We deserve workers deserve good benefits and to be safe at work. and we will always support workers in their demands.
What is supply chain
You don't think
issues
what the
if
Liberals
the
are
US
proposing go
you-
far enough for the competition?
I just have a quick follow-up.
Are you concerned about supply chain issues if the U.S. strike drags on in the automotive sector?
What I'm concerned about is that workers aren't getting a fair share, and I want to see workers be treated fairly. I've seen for a long time, we've all seen record profits being posted by large corporations, and workers are not seeing the benefit of that. Workers are the ones that drive business. Workers are the ones that create the profits that companies enjoy. Workers should receive the benefit of their labor.
So to clarify, you don't think what the Liberals are proposing in terms of those changes to the Competition Act go far enough? And if they don't, did you give Mr. Trudeau an ultimatum today saying, include what I'm proposing in this legislation or else I'm not going to support it?
I'll take it one further. I don't think the Liberals are actually going to do it. They've shown again and again that they don't do anything necessary for people unless forced to. They voted against dental care in the past. They opposed it. We forced them to make it happen. They opposed the idea of doubling the GST rebate when we first proposed the idea. They opposed it. We forced them to do it. I'm concerned that they're just talking again. And it's been 20 months since the cost of food inflation, has outpaced general inflation. That's a pretty serious sign. We were the ones that called for an investigation by the Competition Bureau. We're the ones that called for the CEOs of these big companies to show up in Parliament. We are the ones that have been forcing action on this. And the Liberals, I don't trust to take the action necessary. And that's why we're saying, act, take the steps. We want to see steps taken to protect consumers, to protect Canadians, to bring down the cost of groceries.
Mais en même temps, M. Singh, là, vous êtes encore fait voler vos idées par les libéraux. Êtes-vous tanné de vous faire voler vos idées par les libéraux?
Donc, pour moi, ce n'est pas une question de crédit, c'est une question d'action. Et les libéraux sont excellents avec les bonnes paroles, mais leurs actions, c'est une faillite. C'était 20 mois. Je ne peux pas souligner cette fait suffisamment parce que 20 mois que l'inflation d'épicerie était plus haut que l'inflation générale, c'est un grand message, c'est un grand problème. Et qu'est-ce que les libéraux ont fait? Effectivement, rien. Et quand j'ai demandé la présence des grands PDG, des grandes entreprises, des épiceries, le PDG, j'étais le seul chef là pour poser des questions, pour demander pourquoi vous exploitez les gens comme ça. Donc, dans ce cas, je veux voir des actions. Je ne veux pas voir plus des belles paroles. Je veux voir les actions concrètes. Et ça, c'est pourquoi on a proposé un projet de loi. Et on est bien content de passer ce projet de loi ou notre projet de loi, mais on veut voir des actions concrètes pour aider les gens.
Je voudrais avoir un suivi là-dessus, s'il vous plaît. Merci. Dans votre discours, vous aussi, vous critiquez les conservateurs.
Oui.
Ce que je sache, les conservateurs n'ont pas causé l'inflation. Pourquoi vous attaquez les conservateurs? Ils n'ont rien à voir là-dedans?
Ce qui est clair, c'est qu'on est dans ce problème de crise du logement, par exemple, à cause de pas seulement les libéraux, mais à cause des conservateurs aussi. Parce que dans les derniers 8 ans, quand les libéraux étaient au pouvoir, on a perdu 200 000 logements abordables. Mais avant ça, quand les conservateurs étaient au pouvoir, on a perdu 800 000 logements abordables dans les 10 ans que les conservateurs étaient au pouvoir. Le coût de logement a augmenté 60% dans les 10 ans des conservateurs et un autre 60% dans les 8 ans des libéraux. Donc, les deux partis ont contribué à le problème, au problème qu'on fait face, et les deux doivent être, on doit signaler leur contribution.
Avez-vous l'intention de faire voler vos
Sur
idées, comme
l'assurance
disait mon collègue?
médicaments, M. Singh, le Québec n'en veut pas, dit que c'est de sa juridiction. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de l'éventualité possible de permettre un droit de retrait avec compensation du Québec? Est-ce que c'est ce que vous avez en tête ou pour vous, il faut que ça s'applique partout de la même façon?
Donc, on a parlé avec les syndicats au Québec. Et leur demande au Québec, les syndicats au Québec, ça veut dire les travailleurs du Québec, ils ont dit qu'on a besoin d'une assurance médicaments universelle et publique. Donc, les demandes des travailleurs, c'est d'avoir un programme qui utilisait la force de tous les pays, de tous les travailleurs, pour avoir un programme qui coûte moins cher, qui va sauver l'argent pour les provinces, mais aussi pour les travailleurs. Et ça, c'est ce que je veux voir. Donc, ça va prendre du travail. On doit travailler ensemble avec les provinces et les territoires. Mais le programme qui fonctionne, c'est un programme qui est entièrement universel, public, qui va aider les gens.
Juste quel syndicat, s'il vous plaît? Vous dites que vous avez parlé à des syndicats, lesquels? Et donc, j'en comprends que vous ne voulez pas de droit de retrait.
FTQ, comme le représentant de tous les syndicats au Québec, était vraiment clair avec plusieurs déclarations qu'ils appuient une idée d'une assurance publique et universelle. Et les autres sections des syndicats au Québec ont dit la même chose parce que ça a du sens. Et c'est aussi la même recommandation du comité de commission du gouvernement. Ils ont dit la même chose, qu'on a besoin d'une assurance médicaments qui est universelle et publique. Et la meilleure façon, c'est de rassembler la puissance de tous les pays pour réduire les coûts pour les médicaments. Ça, c'est quelque chose qui va fonctionner. On n'ingère pas dans les compétences des provinces. On utilise le même argent que les provinces dépensent à ce moment, mais si on les dépense ensemble, on peut négocier les meilleurs prix pour les médicaments et on peut acheter les médicaments pour un prix moins cher et ça va aider tout le monde.
The government House Leader talked a lot about pharmacare this morning, but she seemed to suggest that if the bill doesn't pass by your deadline of the end of this year, it'll be the fault of the Conservatives. So let's say we're in a situation where, the Liberals are trying to push it through in good faith. The Conservatives introduce procedural delay tactics to move past your deadline. What do you do in terms of your deal if that is the situation we find ourselves in?
We've heard the same kind of concern in the past that we're not going to be able to meet the deadline. We're not sure we can do it. I'll give you an example when it comes to dental care for kids under 12. The Liberals said, we're not going to be able to make it happen. It's going to be tough. We said, no, it's got to get done. We got it done. And what that means, just to make it really clear, I met with a family that really impacted me, Brianna. She's got 5 kids under 12. And all 5 kids have never seen the dentist in their life. And the reason was, she said, because the cost of living is so high, it's all that she can do to keep a roof over their head and keep food on the table. That's all she can do, and she had to make sacrifices. And she was a little embarrassed and a little sad to say that she couldn't get her kids to the dentist. And I told her, obviously, it's not her fault. She's working as hard as she can, doing the best she can. But each one of her kids saw the dentist for the first time in their life because of what we forced this government to do. And that changed their lives. Those kids were able to get dental care. Those kids were able to get the care they needed. And as a mom, Brianna felt like she was able to provide for her kids. That's what we were able to do. And so we're going to continue to push to make sure we meet the deadlines, that we make sure that the program is universal and public so that it actually covers all Canadians. And I'll do that.
Les chances de Noël et le deal.
Oui, je vais le répéter en français et puis pour ta prochaine question.
Would that concern you, though, and would it affect your supply and confidence agreement if this legislation does not pass, or in the House Leader's language, if it is not up for vote by the end of this year?
Okay, I think you can do both in French and English. I think it's a similar thing. I'll just do it in English because I was just in that vibe, and then I'll switch to French.
Okay.
We have heard the Liberals in the past say they can't meet deadlines. I mean, they're always looking for excuses to get out of things, and we have forced them to do it. So I'm not surprised they're again saying that they can't meet a deadline. They will love to delay. That's their number one tactic. Let's delay and push it off. We're going to force them to do it. We're going to fight hard, and we're going to make them deliver. That's what we've been doing. If for the past 2 years, we've been continually forcing them to do things that they said they did not want to do, they opposed, we made it happen. They said that they could not get it done by a certain deadline, we forced them to get it done. So we're not surprised again with this tactic of putting out there that they can meet the deadline. We're going to remain resolute, keep on fighting for Canadians. We believe in a universal pharmacare program. We believe in the dental care being expanded to seniors, and we're going to force them to do it. Let me just do that in French, and then your next question. Donc, c'est souvent le cas que le gouvernement libéral dit que oh oui, on ne peut pas le faire, c'est impossible, on doit avoir un délai. C'est vraiment une partie du délai. Il aime toujours dire que ce n'est pas possible de faire quelque chose sur une date fixe. Mais comme on a fait dans le passé, on a continué de se battre pour les gens et on a réussi de forcer le gouvernement de faire des choses qu'ils ont dit c'est impossible, on ne peut pas le faire. Et puis, on les force de le faire. C'était la même chose avec les soins dentaires. Et dans le cas des soins dentaires, pour les enfants de moins de 12 ans, ça a vraiment fait une grande différence dans les vies des gens. Même si le gouvernement a dit que ce n'est pas possible, on l'a fait. Et puis, je veux partager l'histoire de Brianna parce que ça m'a vraiment touché. Brianna est une mère une mère de 5 enfants qui ont moins de 12 ans. Et à cause de le coût de la vie qui augmente, à cause des coûts d'épicerie, des coûts de logement, elle a dit que elle peut seulement souligner ses priorités et elle a dû sacrifier les autres choses. Ça veut dire que ses enfants n'ont jamais visité le dentiste. Mais à cause de notre programme, pour la première fois dans leur vie, ces 5 enfants ont visité le dentiste et ils ont reçu les soins nécessaires. Et on est fiers de ça parce que ça va aider plusieurs familles. Et on va l'augmenter pour les aînés et les enfants de moins de 18 ans bientôt.
Ça veut dire quoi forcer sur l'assurance médicaments? Ça veut dire quoi forcer? Vous l'avez dit en français, vous l'avez dit en anglais. Concrètement, est-ce que votre entente avec les libéraux est en jeu si le 29 décembre, il n'y a pas de, ou mettons le 20 décembre, c'est plus réaliste, il n'y a pas de projet de loi d'adopter?
Donc, ce que je veux dire de forcer, on peut montrer l'exemple de l'enquête publique. J'ai dit qu'on a besoin d'une enquête publique. Depuis les débuts, quand cet enjeu a été soulevé, j'ai dit on a besoin d'une enquête publique. Puis, on a mis la pression sur le gouvernement libéral. Puis, on a proposé, on a déposé des motions. On a eu des votes. On a continué la pression et maintenant, on a une enquête publique. Donc, dans la même façon avec les soins dentaires, le gouvernement a dit que non, c'est impossible, on ne peut pas arriver à la date fixe, on doit le prolonger, on doit avoir un délai. Et puis, on a continué avec la pression, on a continué de se battre, et puis on est arrivé avec une...
Et l'entente, si je comprends bien.
On va continuer de faire le travail nécessaire, on va continuer de se battre. J'ai donné des exemples concrets, comment on a réussi, on va faire la même chose encore.
Non, mais s'il n'y a pas de deadline, vous dites que vous allez continuer. Donc, si les libéraux ne respectent pas l'échéance, ça ne vous dérangera pas.
Non, ce n'est pas ce que j'ai dit. J'ai dit que c'était la même chose dans le passé. C'était exactement la même chose. Si on a eu presque la même conférence de presse, vous avez demandé la même question pour les soins dentaires des enfants de moins de 12 ans. J'ai dit, on va forcer le gouvernement de le faire. Vous avez dit, comment vous allez le faire? J'ai dit, on va mettre la pression.
En question la dernière fois.
Et puis, on a réussi avec l'enquête publique. C'était la même question. Vous avez posé la même question. Comment vous allez le faire? Comment vous allez le faire? Et puis, on a forcé le gouvernement de le faire. C'est la même chose qu'on va faire encore. On va forcer le gouvernement. En anglais, okay. Y'all asked me the same question in the past when it came to dental care. You said, oh, they're pushing it back. They're saying they're not going to be able to do it. They're not going to be able to hit your deadline. Are you going to tear up the deal? I said, no, we're going to force them to do it. And they did it. With the public inquiry, I remember being asked the same question. Oh, they said, no, what are you going to do now? Are you going to tear up your agreement? I said, we're going to force them to do it. Guess what? The government has now introduced or said they're going to have a public inquiry. We've continually showed in concrete proof that we are forcing this government to do things despite the fact that they've said no. They said we can't reach this deadline. We're not going to be able to make it happen, and we've made it happen by the deadlines. We made them do things that they said they could not do. We forced the government to deliver on so many things. You can dental care for kids under 12. We forced them to do it. Doubling the GST rebate, they said they couldn't do it. We forced them to do it. The public inquiry, we forced them to do it. Removing the special rapporteur, we forced that to happen. We've been showing concretely each of those things that we forced happen. And we made it happen with votes in the Chamber of Commons.
Many of the priorities under the CASA agreement have been completed. Are you willing to renegotiate with the Liberals on new priorities that tackle affordability?
So what we said is the agreement was always a foundation, not a ceiling. It's not a limit of what we're going to do. It's a ceiling of what needs to be done. So we push for things outside the agreement, and we've won on those things. For example, the doubling of the GC rebate. That was never in the agreement. We forced that. We forced the government to do it. We proposed the idea last year. They said, no, we're not going to do it. The Conservatives came out opposed to it. And then eventually all parties voted in favor of it, and it's happened. So similarly, we're going to force now the government to move on housing. That's a major priority. And on the cost of groceries, like we are talking about today, we're putting forward a bill today that's going to concretely strengthen competition laws in Canada. It'll help bring down the price of groceries. Neither the Liberals or the Conservatives have the courage to take on corporate greed. They weren't even there to ask the CEOs questions. We have that courage. We are taking action, and we're going to force this government to as well.
Mr. Singh, dental care is kind of a fill-the-gap system with the ones that the government's proceeding with now. If they try and replicate that with pharmacare, will you be satisfied, or does your support depend on bringing in a pharmacare bill that is truly universal and comprehensive?
We believe in a universal and comprehensive dental or pharmacare. On dental care, we accepted, and from the beginning, even we ran on 2019 and 2021, this fill in the gaps measure with dental care. Dental care is a very different situation than pharmacare. In pharmacare, the government's own commissioned report indicates the best way to move forward is a universal public program. It is a way that's going to save the most money, create the best coverage. And in Quebec, we've got an example of what the fill in the gap system does. Quebec was ahead of its time for having a program in the first place, but what's come forward after a number of years is the fill in the gap system in Quebec is amongst the most expensive in the world. It is an expensive way, and it enriches insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies, and it doesn't provide the best coverage. So while it was ahead of its time, it's proven to be not the best way to move forward. And that's why, like other countries have figured out, the best way to move forward is a universal public system. It's what the Hoskins report recommended. It is what we're going to push for. And that is what we believe should happen.
You have a one-on-one with the Prime Minister later today. What can you tell us about the tenor of that conversation, especially around, grocery prices, affordability, housing? Will you be frustrated with his approach so far, or are you pleased to see some of the announcements that he's made over the past?
I want to take that question apart in a couple of ways. First, I want to say I'm going to be very firm and frankly disappointed, because it's been 20 months that we've known that the cost of groceries and the inflation on groceries has exceeded general inflation. So we're very disappointed, and I'm going to be very firm that we need to see action. And the reason why we want to be very firm is after 20 months of knowing that this is a serious problem, it's almost 2 years, what is the Liberals' response? To invite the CEOs to come to Ottawa. Well, we forced them to come to Ottawa months ago. So what's the point of inviting them to come to Ottawa now? And for the best case scenario, the Liberals are proposing stabilize your prices. Stabilize the already record high prices that Canadians are struggling to afford. That is meaningless action. That is no action. That is nothing. That is less than nothing. We already did that. So it's repeating something that has already happened, and we already had the answers. These CEOs are not going to bring down prices on their own. They need to be forced. And that's why we're putting in place this proposal around laws that would actually bring down the price of groceries. There are a number of anti-competitive behavior that go on across the country that forces Canadians to pay more for their groceries. One example that got a lot of coverage in Halifax, Dollaramas, which sell cheaper bread, cannot sell cheaper bread if there's a Sobeys nearby. That is anti-competitive behavior that we would do away with our proposed law. We would end the practices that drive up the cost of food. So we need to see action. It's not enough to now have a meeting with the CEOs and ask them nicely to stabilize the prices. That's ridiculous. What we're proposing is to take them on. While the Conservatives want to just blame and complain in a corner, we're proposing real solutions that are actually going to make people's lives better. And that's what we want to see happen.
We have time for one more question.
Okay, one more question. No pressure.
I'll put
okay.
I'll ask about other health priorities that actually don't have a deadline. You have safe long-term care. You also have primary and mental health care. How are you going to hold the Liberals accountable to those promises when there are no deadlines? What does that mean for your work this fall?
We're going to continue to fight for a healthcare system that works for Canadians. We know that's another major concern that people have had. We're seeing the healthcare system collapse in many provinces, and we're seeing a really scary rise of private healthcare, which means people are paying out of pocket to get care. That is not what Canadians want. We want to see a universal public system that takes care of everybody, regardless of how much money you have in your pocket. And the federal government has a lot of power to move forward on these things, and we're going to use the agreement that we have as leverage to fight for some of the changes. The Liberals themselves have promised to do a number of things. So if they break their promise, they're breaking their promise to Canadians. They promise to bring in changes around personal support work. They promise to bring in changes around long-term care. They're not delivering on their own promises. So Canadians will have to ask a question at the end of the day. If this government continues to break promises, is that a government that deserves your support or not? We're going to use our power in this minority government to force them. But ultimately, if they don't do what they promise to do to Canadians, they're breaking their promise to Canadians. Merci. Thanks so much.